Hi, everyone. I am so happy to be here with you all today. My name is Michael Scanlon, and I want to welcome everyone to the 2022 NTACT Capacity Building Virtual Institute, or as we all call it, CBVI for short. And again, my name is Michael Scanlon. I am a youth coordinator at Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center. And really, I just want to introduce myself, as we'll be talking a little bit later with my colleague Jerry and Commissioner Dobak and Director Williams, really on today's theme of providing support and how do we work together? How do we collaborate? How do we engage? How do we motivate? How do we come back stronger after a trying handful of years? So I think we'll be really pleased with a lot of the great conversation today. Really quickly, in essence of time, I really came to this work in advocacy from my own experiences. And I currently also work on different state and federally funded contracts for behavioral health organizations. And so again, I'm just so happy to be here with you all today. And I love to pass it off to my colleague, Jerry. Thanks so much.
Hi, my name is Jerry St. Louis, and I am a licensed independent clinical social worker. And I came into this work because of my personal reasons as well. My personal experience as an LGBT person going through schools, K through 12, and just fighting through the system and having to learn by my own mistakes.
I have the extreme pleasure of introducing one of our speakers today, Acting Deputy Commissioner Carol Dobak, Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services for the RSA. Ms. Dobak also serves as the Commissioner and Director of the State Monitoring and Program Improvement Division. And Ms. Dobak began her RSA career as a program specialist with responsibility for the Client Assistance Program and Protection Advocacy for Individual Rights Program. In 2004, she moved to the Office of Policy and Planning in the Office of the Assistant Secretary with responsibility for RSA's programs, and in particular, State Vocational Rehabilitation Services Program. In 2006, Ms. Dobak became the Chief of the VR Program Unit within SMPID, and in 2016, she became the Director of SMPID, and in 2017, Ms. Dobak assumed the role of Acting Deputy Commissioner. Thank you so much.
And I have the extreme pleasure of introducing Ms. Valerie C. Williams. Ms. Valerie C. Williams, who serves as the Director in Office of Special Education and Programs, where she is responsible for overseeing the administration of IDEA, also known as the Individuals with Disability Act. Ms. Williams also has a unique perspective. As a parent of a child with special needs, she brings in her own personal experience as well as professional experience to this work. Thank you, Ms. Williams.
So thank you guys so much for that introduction. I am very pleased to be here just looking forward actually to the conversation that we're going to have. So I don't want to spend a lot of time in remarks, but RSA, I can speak for Carol and tell you that RSA and OSEP strongly believe in the power of meaningful collaboration. I think that COVID has been extremely traumatizing for a lot of us, both personally and professionally, but there have been a few good things that have come out of it. There has been increased collaboration, cooperation, creativity, and those are the things that I think we need to hold on to. I would argue that we do not need to attempt to go back to what was taking place pre-COVID in 2019, but rather we need to learn the lessons that we have picked up along the way, continue to collaborate and work together closely, be as creative as possible. I think we've all learned to be much more adaptable and flexible and nimble because our systems are typically extremely slow to change, but we haven't had that, we haven't been able to do that in the last couple of years because we've had to be responsive to the needs. So we've all had to move and think and act a lot quicker, and we can continue to do that. So I would advocate that we use all of the lessons we have learned up until now and use those as a springboard to take us to an even better place so that we can better advocate for our children and our youth, shore up the transition process, and that pretty much we would be able to have more effective and better outcomes for all of our students and our youth. So Carol, that was really quick, but I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Valerie, and thank you, everyone. I am really pleased to be here as well in order to address this virtual capacity building institute. The last time that the NTACT invited me to speak to an audience in a CBI, I was with you all in Charlotte, and I really look forward to that time where we once again can join in person and engage in collaboration and partnership together. But until then, I'm really appreciating this opportunity. And in terms of some of the background information I want to provide, I think that certainly if it had not been apparent up until now, it certainly became much more clear with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act enacted in 2014 and the changes that that legislation made to the VR program, particularly the requirement that VR agencies use 15% of their federal VR allotments or vocational rehabilitation program allotments in coordination. And I stress for our purposes of our conversation, in coordination with local education agencies to provide pre-employment transition services to students with disabilities. And that provision in particular certainly has had its intended effect of increasing the numbers of students with disabilities served through the VR program. Today, as it has been since 2017, more than half of the individuals served by the VR program are ages 14 through 25, or as we say, students or youth with disabilities. Of that number, in program year 2020, and when I refer to program year 2020, I'm speaking about the period from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021, or summer of last year. In that time period, 200,000, approximately 200,000 students with disabilities received pre-employment transition services. And also during that period of time, VR agencies provided approximately 1.2 million discrete pre-employment transition services to these students of all types. And these services included, of course, counseling on post-secondary education, job and career counseling, work-based learning experiences, work readiness training, and training in self-advocacy and mentoring services. Now, what I will point out about our program year 2020 performance that I've just informed you about is that performance is down from what it had been in program years 2017 through 2019. And it's down because of the effect that COVID had in that particular program year, which the entire span of that year was affected by COVID. The difficulty that both VR agencies and schools had in terms of working with students with disabilities, and the fact that many of the in-person services that are key to pre-employment transition services were difficult to provide during that time period on a national basis. But what we do know in more recent data for the first 2 quarters of program year 2021, we are on the upswing. Our performance is looking better. And we are approaching the levels of students receiving pre-employment transition services and the number of those services provided prior to COVID. So we're very happy about that. But what we also know is that we still have a situation where not all of our VR agencies are providing, or I should say, meeting the 15% reserve requirement. They are still not expending all of the funds that are expected that they should on pre-employment transition services to students with disabilities. And it is going to take much stronger partnership and collaboration between VR agencies, local educational agencies, employers, other state and local programs and other stakeholders to ensure that all VR agencies will be able to meet this requirement for the benefit of students with disabilities. So we're looking for ways in RSA to address that in collaboration with our partners here in OSEP. But one of the things we do know is that families and students with disabilities have a challenging time in reaching students with disabilities and instilling in families of students with disabilities the confidence that they need to pursue post-secondary education and competitive integrated employment. The confidence that the children from the earliest ages on can be assured that work is in their future. It is much too late for families and students with disabilities that they're entering high school to be introduced to this concept. And it's going to take partnership between RSA and OSEP to identify some ways in which we can work together so that families and children with disabilities are introduced to the world of work at the earliest ages possible. We're also looking at other ways in which we can use RSA's discretionary investments together to support the transition of students and youth with disabilities through collaboration. And so we're planning on the use of some of our disability innovation funds that we may have at our disposal in fiscal year 2023 for competition. And until then, I just want to make all of you aware, if you are not already aware, of the fact that our Disability Innovation Fund has been used by RSA on a competition this year. Approximately $167 million will be used to reduce the reliance of individuals with disabilities, including students and youth, on sub-minimum wage employment through projects that will require and rely heavily on partnerships developed by VR agencies with their other workforce agencies, local and state educational agencies, employers, et cetera. Again, all of whom are essential in working together to reduce their reliance on sub-minimum wage employment. A few other activities we're involved in with OSEP, along with other federal agencies, are under the auspices of the White House Domestic Policy Council, and they involve the production of webinars and written materials that encourage RSA, OSEP, and other federal agencies to come together in support of the braiding and blending of program funds and services for the benefit of individuals with disabilities, including students and youth, as well as webinars, again, and materials on community engagement. And when I speak about community engagement, I'm referring to activities that can be supported by vocational rehabilitation, special education, home and community-based services through Medicaid, disability, or developmental disability agencies, mental health agencies, and a wide variety of other partners, so that students and individuals with disabilities who are either unemployed or underemployed can engage in volunteer and other activities in their community to obtain the social skills, widen their networks through which they can obtain information about employment opportunities and other work-based skills so that they have maximum opportunities to expand their employment potential. And with that, I just want to thank all of you for all that you are doing in partnership with your colleagues in other state and local agencies, with providers, et cetera, so that together on the federal level and with you, we can, through our collaboration, improve opportunities for students and youth with disabilities as they pursue employment. So thank you very much.
All right. So the first question will be for both Acting Commissioner Dobak and Director Williams. In your roles, what do you see as your opportunities and challenges for supporting youth and students with disabilities and their families in transition?
I will jump in and go first. One of the reasons why I find that I think transition is extremely important and a huge opportunity. And Carol and I have had a lot of conversations about this in the 4 months that I've been here, and she alluded to it, is that I think that we can do a much better job of speaking to our families of our young children with disabilities to let them know what transition is, that transition is coming, and what it entails. I believe that there are far too many families with young children with disabilities who believe that their loved ones will always be home, never be able to work, make a meaningful wage, live independently. So by the time we start the formal transition process, I feel like it's a little too late. I feel like they have had those 14, 16 years to kind of wallow in the despair of not thinking that anything is possible. But I think that when we reach our families earlier, they have a chance to develop the vision along with their loved one on what their future is going to look like. And so I think we can start messaging earlier. I think we can start dropping seeds so that children know that there are opportunities for employment. There are post-secondary opportunities, and that whole world is available to you as well. And so by the time we start putting pen to paper and figuring out exactly what that is going to look like, I think we'll all be much more productive, and it'll be a more efficient process. And I think it will be a more exciting process as opposed to the family and the student just hearing about it for the first time. So I think that's a huge opportunity. I think that we can also shore up our systems, because if there is great collaboration between RSA and OSEP and between the Department of Education and say labor and a lot of our other interagency partners, then that cliff that people talk about sometimes, it doesn't have to occur, so that we can make sure that everyone that should be getting services are getting services, and that on the tail end, there are actually jobs waiting for them, right? Not jobs that put them in an underemployed state, but jobs that will actually support an independent life. And I think there are great opportunities for that across the board. And Carol and I and RSA and OSEP are completely committed to that. The challenges, I think overcoming COVID is going to continue to be a challenge for a number of years. I don't think we're necessarily done with COVID, but I think we're getting through it. I think that we will have to continue to use data to inform our decisions, which I think is important. I believe the data for the last couple of years are not going to look good for anyone, right? And so in that respect, that data is going to be a blip on the radar screen. But what we want to convey is that we cannot use COVID as an excuse. It happened. We're moving out of it, but what are we going to do to get to the other side? How are we going to shore up all the supports and services that we know our students and youth are entitled to make sure that they are still able to get it? Those are where some of the challenges are and some of the opportunities, as well as the Secretary Cardona. The bedrock of everything that he's doing is in equity, right? And so I would argue that we need to look at the data to make sure that we are making equitable decisions. So not only when we deliver these supports and services and we're making these plans, but look at the data to figure out who is receiving these supports and these services. Are all students getting what they need, or are only subsections of students getting what they need? Because we need to address what all students need. It shouldn't matter where they live. It shouldn't matter what their disability is. We cannot train and teach to the kids in the middle, right? We need to be concerned about what all students and what all youth need, and making sure that all of them are able to achieve that. And so those, I think, are some of the opportunities, some of the challenges, and I'm sure there's a whole lot more, but I don't want to take a ton more time because Carol has a lot more to share on the RSA side.
Okay. Well, thank you. And wow, there's so much I could say in response to what Valerie has just shared in terms of her thinking in response to this question. I think one of the points that I heard Valerie make throughout her response is that there are a number of challenges in terms of where our schools and our VR agencies find themselves at this point in time. One of the things we do know is that both special education and VR agencies have experienced staffing issues. I know of VR agencies that have vacancy rates as high right now as 25% in their VR counseling ranks. That is way too high to be able to serve all the individuals with disabilities who need assistance as they're coming back into the workforce and trying to pursue employment. They're also, as they always have, facing limited fiscal or experiencing limited fiscal resources typically. Both of that make it very, very challenging to take advantage of the opportunities that Valerie has spoken about. But that in and of itself, if nothing else, underscores the need for greater collaboration so that special education and VR together can leverage their resources so that students with disabilities receive the transition services that they need at this point in time, and be able to take advantage of new developments in our economy with the types of work that can be done through telework, et cetera, and just growing industries. We need that collaboration to occur. So I think that's the point I wanted to make here.
Just wanted to jump in time. I think, Michael, if you want to ask your next question, and Jerry, maybe we will not do the third question. So Valerie and Carol have a chance to ask you guys questions, if you're good with that. Okay, thanks.
All right. No, thank you both so much. I think Acting Commissioner Dobak and Director Williams, I think you both have such a great way of being visionaries. And how do you holistically look at systemic change? How do we support families, students, and systems? And so that leads me to my next question. Really, if you both could really share a little bit about your ideas of how we can really bring more of that human element to the work and what that might look like going forward.
Good question.
So I'll jump in first. I really love that question because you mentioned the human element. And I think that sometimes we can get so bogged down in the paper and the process that we sometimes forget there are actual people associated with our work, right? And I think that the more we can maintain that connection and remember that, then we will all be more successful. And I think that circles back to what Carol and I have both mentioned earlier, which is the collaboration and the cooperation. Because when you talk to someone, when you work with someone, then you build a relationship and there is some level of trust there. And I think that informs everything else that happens going forward. And so at its core, we can use that as a springboard to deal with some of our equity issues, right? And so I think everything starts with the human element. And I also would like to see more work on self-advocacy and on self-determination, because even though we might look at the data and that might help inform where some of the gaps are and where we need to go as a system, why don't we include some of the people that we're working on behalf of and find out what are their dreams, what are their thoughts, what do they think, what do they see for their futures? And so it's not just coordination and collaboration within the system, but it's also with those who we are serving. And I think the process will work that much better when we have that type of relationship fostered and built, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with Valerie. Through collaboration and partnership and building those relationships even before you need to engage in a particular project for a particular reason, just reaching out and getting to know your partners in your states informally will prepare you for that intense collaboration and partnership, which may have to take place under limited timeframes, et cetera, to get a project off the ground. And in doing that informal outreach and engagement, you help to ensure that those relationships will be sustainable and not just focused on a particular project and then everybody walks away. That's done, and you're no longer working together. You're working separately again. So I think that's some of what we're trying to do through our discretionary investments, and that the NTACT, I think in and of itself, has been very helpful with. Valerie mentioned some of the other people and players that could be involved. I think, as was recognized in prior capacity building institutes, centers for independent living and the staff with disabilities who work for those centers can play a key role in supporting families and children and students with disabilities in transition, and working together with professionals in special education and vocational rehabilitation. There are a number of examples of that happening across the country, and we're looking for ways to help to support further collaboration of that type.
So if you all want to ask, like, when Jerry a question or two.
Absolutely. I have a question. So this is for both of you. Let's go with Michael first and then Jerry. You've both been engaged in secondary transition services while you were in high school, and supported students, youth, and young adults in your advocacy roles. So given your background, your experiences, what are some of the needs and supports that you would recommend for young adults with disabilities?
Sure. I love this question. And I think we've been talking about the common themes already, right? But I want to pull from one of those themes really is that human element. And I think going back, I think what comes to mind for me, it's not just what we're doing, it's how we're doing it. And so I think what was really helpful for me when I really needed that support in my life was, again, just even that one friendly face to check in. How am I doing? And that really can apply anywhere, right? School, home, any age, any stage, anywhere. And I think from that, I think I'd love to see, even more, as we said, mentoring and those personal connections. I'm a huge advocate of peer support, and how can you lift up young adults and help them to move forward? And so I think that for me, it really is investing in young adults. And I think you mentioned, Director Williams, really, I was jotting down notes when you both were speaking, and you both mentioned belief and how can you see beyond the now? And I talk about that a lot in my work, is I think when young people may be struggling or families are struggling, it can be so hard to, in our day-to-day lives and busyness, how do we see beyond where they are at now and any preconceived bias or notion? So I think I fully support programs, policies, having those authentic conversations that may be uncomfortable at certain times. But I think I've seen a lot of growth in my own life as a person. I've seen a lot of growth here in Connecticut where I work, when you can have those honest conversations respectfully and professionally. But I think, integrating and finding where can we be creative, where can we pull in young adults, how can we, so it's really, again, really breaking down and having really that vision and that creativity within your collaborations and your work.
I would say my response would be streamlining the services a little bit more. My parents are from Haiti. So they came over and we were the first generation here. And so there was a lot of things they had to find out for themselves. And a lot of times they had to, you had to go here to get this assessment, and you had to come here and talk to this person. And so because English is my parents' second language, there's a little shame in trying to speak to different people in English because you may not be able to understand what's actually going on. And although there are individuals in South Florida that do translate, that is usually like one person between 2 or 3 schools. And then so a lot of the time I was left to kind of figure things out, explain to my parents the best that I could, and figure out what the next steps were from then. So that was something that I kind of had to work my way up with. I have a sister who, my niece is now graduated, but she also had a severe ID, intellectual disability, and she had a really hard time trying to figure stuff out because my sister was born in Haiti, but luckily she came over toward the end of high school and was able to kind of finish that and learn some English before she had my niece, and so it was a little bit better for her by the time she was taking my niece through school. And the second part is comprehensive and inclusive. I just know that sex education is big, but people with disabilities are left out of sex education conversations. And so I also do a queer sex education class, and we were not targeting LGBT students with disabilities. We just noticed that 80 to 90% of the students who enrolled in our course were students with disabilities. And so we started to fix our course to also address those things as well, because if a disability is not always physical, you can't always see it all the time. And so we included that part in our sex education, and we had to go back and we asked our students, we're like, did you even feel as an LGBT person that you were included? And they were like, no. And I was like, well, did you feel that as a person with a disability that you were included? And they were like, no, I walked out of the rooms more confused than anything. And so we wanted to take that into consideration when teaching the new youth about they can be sexual. There are things that go on after life, and having them be a part of that conversation is very important because we meet them where they are and try to help them in their next steps.
Well, thank you. And I guess this is Carol, and I'll just step in here if I can with the next question. First of all, Jerry, I really want to thank you for your response and your sharing your family story, and just say that, we often talk about the benefits of streamlining services so that individuals with disabilities and their families can more easily access what they need. But I don't think I've ever heard anybody so eloquently speak to the benefits of and the equity that streamlining of services can bring. So thank you for that. And I just have one question left for both you and Michael, and that is, what suggestions do you have for adults who are in the lives of individuals with disabilities, particularly adults who are working to provide them services? What do they need to know? What can they do better themselves so that students with disabilities get what they need?
Sure, I'm happy to start. I really love this question too, because, and Jerry, you modeled it in sharing about what you do in your work. And I think that really is modeling those warm, curious questions. It's not stepping into fix it mode or any preconceived notions. And I think, and I say that a lot, and it's not that often people have ill intent most of the time. It really is, again, it's almost this natural response or, and I think I actually was at a great presentation from a colleague the other week at a conference we were at together, and he said something that stuck with me, my colleague Jake, who's a fellow coordinator, and he said, really the data and the results will come when you focus on the relationship and the human element and treating people as people. So I think it really is stepping out in whatever your role is, being present in the moment. And again, just asking, what are you willing to do? What would you like to see? It really is breaking it down in those questions. And I know for me, I had a traumatic brain injury at 4 years old, and that really was where my recovery journey started. And if I didn't have those core supportive adults in my life who could see beyond the now, like I said earlier, and ask me those questions and really help mold me and prepare me, and building myself up to make those decisions. And I have a personal quote, I call it failing forward, is being okay with letting go. And it's okay if, you try something and it's not what you thought it would be. So I think it really is combining both the opportunity and freedom to try things out and just having that collaborative partnership and relationship really whenever you can.
I like that. I always say maybe this is a social worker in me, and I've always heard this, is meeting people where they are. Including them in whatever plans that you have for them, because it is literally their life. And just making sure that their voice is heard, and making sure that you have as much support around them so they can live as independently as possible. And taking into consideration lifestyles, ethnicities, everything, and just meeting people where they are ultimately.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jerry, for sharing your responses and your thinking.
And thank you all for having this lovely conversation with us. It's been very informative, and I learned quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to seeing what new innovative ideas are coming out in the future.
Yes, I echo that. And I thank you both for your leadership and your partnership with us for this. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right. And have a terrific CBI